Yeah, or like, what if I said the very cells making up your body right now are the result of this microscopic kidnapping that happened, I don't know, over 2 billion years ago?
Which is super wild to even try and wrap your head around.
Totally wild. So today we are decoding this epic 3.7 billion year old biological mystery. And honestly, the craziest part is that our source material for this deep dive is, well, it's actually an incredibly dense university study guide.
Yeah, it's literally a midterm review for a course called GES 103.
Right, which, normally brings to mind fluorescent library lights and like desperate late night cramming.
Oh, absolutely. But I mean, if you look past the academic formatting and the bullet points, what's actually mapped out in those pages is, well, it's the ultimate biological saga.
It really is.
We are tracing the literal journey of life on Earth. I mean, from a single microscopic cell just floating in a primordial ocean, all the way to complex walking, talking animals.
And we are doing something a little different with you today. We've got a special format for this deep dive, which is basically teach me the concepts and then quiz me after.
I love this format.
Right. So we're going to break down the unseen rules of the biological game. We're going to trace the dramatic branches of the tree of life. And then at the very end, we're going to hit you with a rapid fire quiz.
We want to test your retention and see if you can survive the evolutionary gauntlet, basically.
Exactly. Because testing ourselves is,
It's the best way to move these ideas from short-term memory into actual long-term understanding.
yes.
It forces our brains to really synthesize the journey we're about to go on.
Okay, let's unpack this because I refuse to look at this material like some boring textbook. I'm reading it like Earth's ultimate, high stakes family tree.
It's a great way to look at it.
But before we can zoom out and look at the whole tree, we really need to understand the underlying mechanics, right? Like,
Yeah.
how does life actually change form?
Right, so the primary engine driving literally every single change we're going to talk about today is natural selection.
The big one.
Yeah, it is the relentless filter of nature that leads to adaptation. And that whole process, it revolves around biological fitness.
Which is tricky because I feel like we use the word fitness all wrong.
We absolutely do. In evolutionary terms, fitness has absolutely nothing to do with, like, physical strength or going to the gym.
Right.
An organism's fitness is strictly a measure of its survival and reproductive advantage.
Yeah.
So if a specific trait allows an individual to live long enough in its environment to, pass its genes to the next generation.
Then that trait represents high fitness.
Exactly.
So the text actually categorizes those adaptive high fitness traits into 3 distinct buckets, right? Structural, biochemical, and behavioral.
Yeah, 3 buckets.
And structural makes sense immediately. Like a bird gets a slightly sharper beak that helps it crack harder seeds, that's structural.
Sure.
And then a biochemical adaptation is internal, like a snake developing a gland that, produces lethal venom.
Right, happening on a chemical level inside the body.
But the behavioral adaptations, those feel like they require a bit more, I don't know, strategy.
They do, and they are incredibly powerful. So take the penguin, for example.
Okay, I love penguins.
They inhabit one of the most brutal, freezing environments on the planet, right? And their structural adaptations.
Like their thick blubber.
Yeah, thick blubber, specialized feathers. That only gets them so far. So they utilize a behavioral adaptation, which is they huddle.
Oh, like when they all bunch up together in the snow?
Exactly. Thousands of penguins pack tightly together in these shifting, rotating formations to share and trap body heat. And that isn't just some cute thing they do for nature documentaries.
Right, it's survival.
It is a calculated action that directly increases their biological fitness. If they didn't huddle, I mean, they would literally freeze before reproducing.
Wow. And this actually brings up a concept that totally shifted my perspective on evolution, which is the speed at which it happens.
Oh, generation time.
Yes. Because the speed of the evolutionary game completely changes depending on who is playing, and it all comes down to that generation time, which is basically the time between a parent being born and them having offspring of their own.
Right. And you really have to consider the math on that. For humans, an average generation time is roughly 30 years.
30 years.
So it takes 3 decades to flip the genetic coin, so to speak, and see if any new advantageous traits get passed down. But a penguin's generation time is only about 4 to 6 years.
So natural selection is running its test phases way more frequently for them.
Significantly more frequently.
Because more generations over the exact same period of time equals more chances for the DNA to shift.
Yes, exactly.
So despite humans building rockets and computers, on a purely biological level, penguins are actually evolving faster than we are.
They really are. That is the power of a shorter generation time. It allows for faster genetic divergence because DNA inevitably changes over time, and that divergence is the ultimate driving force behind the creation of entirely new species.
Which is speciation.
Right, speciation.
But how does a completely new species actually cement itself? Because you need reproductive barriers to really seal the deal.
You do. You have to stop the gene flow.
Right. So the study guide talks about prezygotic barriers, which are things that stop two animals from fertilizing an egg in the first place.
Right, before fertilization.
Like maybe their mating dances just don't match, or, their breeding seasons are months apart.
Right, one waits in spring, one in fall.
Yeah. But if they somehow get past that, nature has this backup plan called a postzygotic barrier, which happens after fertilization.
Think of it as a biological dead end.
Okay.
The classic example from the text is what happens when a horse and a donkey mate.
Oh, right, the mule.
Yeah. They are genetically close enough to produce an offspring, the mule. But the mule is hit by this massive postzygotic barrier known as hybrid sterility.
Because the chromosomes are just messed up.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah.
Because the horse and donkey chromosomes don't align perfectly, the mule is born sterile. It literally cannot have babies of its own.
So the genetic line just stops cold.
Exactly.
The mule can't create a new population of mules, so the horse and the donkey remain two completely separate species.
Right, the barrier holds.
But to even get to the point where a horse and a donkey are that different, something had to separate them a long time ago. Like, they need geographic isolation.
A physical barrier is usually the huge catalyst for speciation, yeah. So a massive earthquake creates a canyon, or a river changes its course, and it effectively splits a single population of animals in two.
Okay.
Suddenly they can't reach each other. And this physical barrier completely stops the flow of genes between the two groups.
You know what? It's basically the ultimate friend group breakup.
Wait, what do you mean?
Think about it. You have a tight circle of friends, but then a physical barrier happens. Like, half of them move to a completely different city across the country.
Okay, I see where you're going.
That's your geographic isolation.
Yeah.
And because they aren't hanging out every day, the communication stops. That's the reduced gene flow.
Right, the text messages slow down.
Exactly. And slowly, over years, the two separate groups start developing their own unique inside jokes, their own slang, entirely different weekend routines. That is the genetic divergence.
That's actually a brilliant way to put it.
Right. And eventually they meet up at a reunion 10 years later, and they can't even understand each other's references anymore. They've speciated.
They're a new species of friend group.
Totally. So if these physical barriers stop gene flow, geographic isolation is the catalyst that forces a single group to split into two completely distinct evolutionary paths.
That captures the mechanism perfectly. Because once that gene flow is severed, the two isolated groups face different environmental pressures, and their DNA mutates in different directions.
And it just keeps compounding.
Yeah. And if you trace all of those diverging paths backward, millions and millions of years down the branches of the family tree, every single living thing on this planet converges at a single starting point.
The base of the tree of life, the universal common ancestor, which, looking at the study guide, the evidence points to life appearing on Earth around 3.7 billion years ago.
Yeah.
Which is just a staggering number. I can't even picture 3.7 billion years.
It is an almost unfathomable amount of time. And from that singular starting point, all life today falls under three massive umbrellas or domains.
Yeah.
Bacteria, archaea, and eukarya.
And for the first couple of billion years, Earth was basically ruled exclusively by the prokaryotes, right? The bacteria and archaea.
Oh, yeah, completely.
Just single-celled, incredibly simple organisms. No brain, no complex internal parts, just microscopic biological machines floating in water.
Very simple.
But then, around 2.8 billion years ago, a massive biochemical adaptation occurred. One of these simple cells figured out photosynthesis.
And that changed the trajectory of the entire planet, honestly.
Yeah.
Because photosynthesis allowed these early prokaryotes to take abundant non-living inputs from their environment like sunlight, carbon dioxide, and water, and actually convert them into usable energy or food.
But it's not the food that changed the world, right? It's the exhaust.
Yes.
The byproduct. The byproduct of photosynthesis is oxygen. So you have these trillions of microscopic cells spending millions of years just exhaling oxygen and completely transforming Earth's atmosphere.
They literally pump the air full of the exact fuel needed for larger, more complex life to eventually exist. You cannot get complex animals without oxygen,
Right.
and you certainly can't get them without complex cells.
Yeah.
Before anything could grow legs or a brain, the simple prokaryotes had to evolve into the eukaryotes.
Which are cells with complex internal structures.
Exactly.
And the leap from a simple cell to a complex eukaryotic cell is wild to me. The guide mentions one theory called autogenic origin,
Yeah, that's one way it happened.
which the best way I can visualize this is to think of a simple cell like a massive, totally disorganized studio apartment.
Okay, I like that.
Everything, the DNA, the proteins, the energy production, it's all just happening in one big open room. And autogenic origin is essentially the cell finally building interior walls.
Right, compartment walls.
Yeah, the outer membrane just folded in on itself to create a separate, protected bedroom just for the DNA, which we now call the nucleus.
And building those internal compartments allowed the cell to organize and really protect its most vital functions.
But there's another mechanism for how cells became complex, and it's so much more dramatic.
Oh, endosymbiosis.
Wait, okay, here's where it gets really interesting to me. Are you telling me that a complex cell was formed because one microscopic organism literally swallowed another one whole, and instead of digesting it, they just became permanent roommates?
That is exactly what the endosymbiotic theory describes, yes.
That's insane.
It is. A larger predatory cell engulfed a smaller bacteria that happened to be exceptionally good at producing energy. But rather than destroying it for a quick meal, the larger cell effectively kept it alive.
Because it was useful.
Super useful. The host cell provided a safe, protected environment, and in exchange, the smaller bacteria pumped out a massive surplus of energy.
Literally the best roommate agreement in history.
Truly.
But how do we actually know this happened? It sounds like sci-fi.
Well, we have a biological smoking gun.
Ooh, what is it?
If you look at the mitochondria in your own cells right now,
Yeah.
The organelles responsible for producing your energy, they don't share your regular DNA.
Wait, really?
Really.
Hmm.
Mitochondria have their own completely separate circular DNA that looks exactly like ancient bacterial DNA,
Mm-hmm.
and they replicate independently of the rest of the cell.
No way.
Yeah. They are, for all intents and purposes, ancient bacteria still living inside us.
That is mind-bending. And I remember reading that later on, this same microscopic kidnapping process happened again with photosynthetic bacteria, right?
Yes.
Which is how certain complex cells acquired chloroplasts, allowing them to make energy from the sun.
Exactly right. And once you have these highly efficient, organized eukaryotic cells, the biological brakes are totally off. It just unlocks an explosion of diversity, leading straight into biology's ultimate junk drawer.
The junk drawer, yes, the protists.
The protists.
I love that name. Because basically, if you are a complex eukaryotic cell, but you don't fit the strict definitions of a plant, an animal, or a fungus, congratulations, you get thrown into the protist category.
Yep, you're a protist.
And some of them just move around like microscopic blobs like the amoeba.
They are defined entirely by exclusion, which makes them incredibly varied. I mean, we really have to acknowledge the devastating side of this group, too.
Like disease.
Yeah, like Plasmodium. It's a microscopic protist transmitted by mosquitoes, and it is the exact organism responsible for causing malaria in humans.
Wow, okay. So they can be deadly,
Very.
but they also have a critically vital, like life-sustaining side, right?
Oh, yeah.
Because there is a specific microscopic protist that lives inside the tissue of corals in the ocean.
Another roommate situation.
Exactly. In another brilliant roommate situation, this protist performs photosynthesis and shares the food with the coral, which helps the corals survive in nutrient-poor waters.
And this is where coral bleaching comes in. Because when ocean temperatures rise or, pollution causes environmental stress, those protists either abandon the coral or they just die off.
And that's what causes the bleaching.
Yes. The coral loses its brilliant color because it has literally lost its internal life support system.
Wow. It just shows how everything is balanced on a knife's edge.
Absolutely.
Now, out of this ocean filled with single-celled complexity, some organisms hit an evolutionary wall. The water was getting crowded. So they decided to take on a nearly impossible challenge, leaving the water entirely.
Moving to dry land.
Right. We're talking about Kingdom Plantae, the plants.
Plants are multicellular autotrophs, meaning they produce their own food. But moving to dry land presented a brutal gauntlet of challenges. Think about it. In the water, you have natural buoyancy holding you up, and you never have to worry about drying out. On land, You are fighting crushing gravity, and the air is constantly trying to suck the moisture out of your cells.
So the evolutionary steps they took to conquer land, it's like watching a multi-million-year technological arms race.
It really is.
Because first out of the water were the bryophytes, things like mosses.
Very simple.
Yeah, they were incredibly simple. They had to grow flat and super close to the moist ground because they didn't have any internal plumbing. Like they couldn't pull water up, so they just absorbed it directly from the wet mud.
But to move further inland, they needed an upgrade.
And that brings us to the ferns.
Right.
Which the guide says was a monumental leap because ferns evolved a vascular system.
Internal plumbing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
microscopic tubes to transport water up from the roots and send sugars down from the leaves.
But plumbing wasn't enough to fight gravity, right? The ferns also utilize lignin.
Which isn't just biological scaffolding. It is essentially the moment biology invented wood.
Because
It's a tough, rigid polymer that reinforced the plant's cell walls. Without lignin, forests literally could not exist. Nothing could grow taller than a bush. Lignin allowed plants to build vertical structures and actually reach for the sunlight.
But ferns still had a glaring weakness, because their reproduction still required water for the sperm to swim to the egg.
Oh, right.
So to completely conquer the dry, arid continents, you need the gymnosperms, the pine trees.
Game changers.
They were the ultimate game changers because they were the first plants to evolve seeds and pollen.
Which is so cool. The female cones produce the seeds, which act as this hard, protective bunker for the plant embryo, packing it with a food supply so it can survive harsh winters.
And the male cones produce the pollen.
And for years, I just thought of pollen as the yellow dust that ruins my sinuses. But pollen is basically an armored delivery drone.
That is an excellent way to conceptualize it, an armored drone. Pollen creates a tough, waterproof shell around the fragile male genetic material. It completely freed plants from their dependence on water for reproduction.
They didn't need the puddle anymore.
No puddle needed. They could just release these armored drones into the wind, allowing them to spread deep into dry, harsh environments where ferns could never survive.
And once you can reproduce through the air, you set the stage for the most diverse plant group today, the angiosperms.
The flowering plants.
They took the armored drone concept and added targeted marketing.
Right. Because with angiosperms, the flyer itself is the masterstroke.
Mm.
Wind delivery is incredibly inefficient, right? You have to produce millions of pollen grains just hoping one randomly hits the target.
It's a numbers game. So what does this all mean? Flowers are essentially just a brilliantly colored neon billboard advertising to insects.
Come meet here.
Exactly. The plant bribes a bee with sugary nectar, and while the bee is eating, the plant dusts it with pollen. The bee then flies directly to the next flower, acting as a highly efficient, targeted courier service for the plant's genetics.
It is an incredible symbiosis.
Really is.
But notice a common theme here. Plants solve the problem of surviving on land by building complex structures to make their own food from the sun.
But what if you don't have chlorophyll? What if you can't photosynthesize?
Well, that forces an entirely different survival strategy, which is stealing calories.
Yep.
You have to rely on absorbing or ingesting other living things to survive. You are a heterotroph.
And that reality splits the tree of life into two fascinating new directions: the fungi and the animals. Let's dig into kingdom fungi first.
Okay.
They are classified as absorptive heterotrophs. They are the world's decomposers.
And their method of eating is entirely alien to us because the mushroom you see popping up above the dirt, that's just the temporary fruiting body. It's just the reproductive organ.
Right, the real action is below ground.
The actual main body of the fungus, the mycelium, is entirely hidden underground, and it's made up of these microscopic thread-like structures called hyphae.
And because fungi don't have stomachs, they use external digestion.
Which is wild. Right. Those hyphae spit powerful enzymes out into the surrounding soil, literally melting dead leaves and fallen trees into a nutrient soup, and then they just efficiently slurp those calories right back in.
And their resilience is legendary, because when they reproduce, they release spores. And these microscopic life capsules can survive extreme heat, freezing cold, and total drought, just lying dormant for years until they encounter a damp, favorable environment to suddenly spring to life.
And you see that resilience in how widely they're utilized. I mean, we have penicillium, the fungus that gave us the first life-saving antibiotics.
No.
We have single-celled yeasts that give us bread and beer. And we have lichens, which isn't even a single organism. It's actually a fungus and an algae teaming up, living so closely together they function as one unit to survive. on bare rock.
But their most impactful role on the planet is hidden beneath our feet, right? In
Yeah.
the mycorrhizal relationship.
Yes, this is where fungi form a massive mutualistic bond with the roots of plants and trees.
So they team up.
They do. The fungal network is so incredibly fine that it can reach deep into the soil, gathering hard-to-reach water and rare minerals, and it funnels them directly into the tree's roots.
And in exchange, the tree pumps sugars, which it made from the sundown, into the roots to feed the fungus. It is literally a hidden underground economy.
It is.
It's like an underground internet connecting the entire forest, trading resources in real time. I'm continually mind-blown that given how alien fungi seem, living mostly underground, spitting out enzymes, spreading microscopic spores, their evolutionary path sits right alongside ours.
But the connection makes perfect sense when you realize we are both heterotrophs. We both survive by consuming the energy of others.
We're both stealing calories.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But where fungi are absorptive, Kingdom Animalia went a completely different route. We are ingestive heterotrophs.
Meaning we eat things whole.
Right. We evolved complex internal digestive tracts. We take the food inside our bodies to break it down.
And to find that food, our evolutionary journey became heavily focused on how our bodies are shaped. The symmetry.
Because in biology, form dictates function.
Always.
The earliest, simplest animals, like sea sponges, are asymmetrical. They have no distinct shape. But as animals became slightly more complex, we see the evolution of radial symmetry.
Think of a starfish or a jellyfish. You can divide them like a pie from the top down.
And radial symmetry is incredibly useful if you are mostly stationary or just drifting in the ocean.
Because you can look all around.
Exactly. It allows you to interact with your environment, detect threats, or grab passing food equally from all 360 degrees.
But there is a ceiling to that design. Because if you want to actively hunt, if you want purpose-driven, rapid forward movement, radial symmetry is just too clunky.
Way too clunky.
You need bilateral symmetry.
Bilateral symmetry. That is the blueprint for us.
Yeah.
You can only divide us down the middle by one single plane. We have a distinct left side and a distinct right side.
And that evolutionary shift was monumental. Bilateral symmetry streamlines the body for rapid movement. And more importantly, because you are now consistently moving in one direction, it makes total sense to put all your sensory equipment at the front of the vehicle.
Which means evolving ahead.
Right. You put the eyes, the nose, the mouth, and eventually the brain right at the front to process the environment you are moving into.
Yep.
And that streamlined, forward-facing shape leads directly to the chordates organisms developing a dorsal nerve cord, and eventually, the vertebrates, animals with backbones.
Which ultimately branches out into the complex mammals walking around today.
It's amazing. We successfully climbed from a single microscopic apartment 3.7 billion years ago, up through the eukaryotic kidnapping, onto dry land with the plants, and all the way to moving bilateral animals.
It's a phenomenal progression of problem solving. But now that we've laid out the rules and traced all the branches, it is time to see how much of this journey actually locked into place for you.
That's right. We are keeping our promise from the top of the deep dive. It's time for the Teach Me and Quiz Me format.
Here we go.
I'm going to ask you 4 rapid-fire questions based strictly on the mechanisms we just explored today. I'll read the question, I'll give you a beat to lock in your answer in your head, and then we will reveal the truth. Let's see if you survived the evolutionary gauntlet. Ready? Here we go.
We talked about the evolutionary clock. Humans take about 30 years to flip to a new generation. Penguins take 4 to 6 years. Based on that generation time, which species actually evolves faster? Think about it for a second. Got your answer.
The answer is penguins. Because their much shorter generation times mean natural selection can test out and act upon new traits far more frequently, giving them more evolutionary rolls of the dice over the exact same period.
Awesome. All right, question 2. A horse and a donkey can mate to create a mule. But what is the specific biological term for why the evolutionary line stops there, preventing the mule from having babies of its own? Lock it in. What's the term?
That mechanism is hybrid sterility. And it is a post-zygotic reproductive barrier that ensures the parent species remain genetically distinct from one another.
All right, halfway there. Question 3. Which specific group of plants was the very first to utilize pollen, that microscopic armored delivery drone, completely freeing them from needing water to reproduce? Think back to the plant timeline. What's the answer?
That would be the gymnosperms, which includes the pine trees. Inventing the seed and the pollen grain was the absolute key to conquering dry inland environments.
Excellent. And the final question, question 4. We know corals are struggling, but what biological event actually causes coral bleaching? Think back to our junk drawer. got it.
Coral bleaching occurs when the microscopic protocysts that live inside the coral tissue, the vital roommates performing photosynthesis, leave or die due to environmental stress, completely starving the coral of its life support.
So how did you do? Even if you blanked on a couple of them, just taking the time to search your memory for the answer actually helps solidify the neural pathway for next time.
It really does. Testing your recall is how you transform a passive stream of audio into active, retained knowledge. You just mentally mapped out the mechanics of life on Earth.
We really have covered some immense ground today. We decoded how natural selection forces adaptation. We visualized simple prokaryotes inventing photosynthesis to pump out oxygen, and then complex eukaryotes acquiring their own internal power plants through endosymbiosis.
The microscopic kidnapping.
Exactly. We watched plants invent wood and armored pollen to conquer the dry land, and we dug into the bizarre external digestion of fungi.
It is an epic story driven by geographic isolation, genetic mutations, and the relentless pressure to simply survive another day. But, there's a fascinating, almost unsettling implication hidden in the rules we discussed today.
Oh, unsettling how? What's that?
Well, we learned that geographic isolation is the primary catalyst for speciation, right?
Right, the friend group breakup.
Exactly. A physical barrier separates a population, it stops the gene flow, and over long periods, they diverge into new species. We also noted that human generation time is quite slow, 30 years.
Right.
But think about the modern world. With the invention of transcontinental airplanes, massive ocean liners, and just global transit networks, human technology has essentially eliminated geographic isolation for our species.
Whoa. I mean, you can be on the opposite side of the planet in 14 hours.
Right. There are virtually no completely isolated populations of humans left.
That's crazy to think about.
Precisely. We have effectively guaranteed a massive, continuous global flow of genes. So the thought we want to leave you to ponder is this. Given that we have destroyed our own geographic barriers, how might that alter the future branches of our evolutionary tree?
Wow.
Without that physical isolation to force genetic divergence, will the human species ever naturally split into a new species again?
That is heavy. A 3.7 billion-year-old law of biology, completely bypassed by the invention of the jet engine. Well, thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive. Keep looking closely at the incredibly complex world around you, keep asking questions, and never stop exploring.